You're a soul man, Charles.
That I am.
Sorry, I
How are
was
you?
a little far to the left there. Oh, a little too far to the left, Charles.
It's a history of the aughts.
Just an inch will do it. You know, you fall off the cliff.
That's
The Lewis brothers.
amazing. You know, Bill actually has called himself, and his supporters have called himself, the first African-American president.
Which I find incredibly insulting, and I'm not even black.
You sure?
Well, yes, but I mean, I don't understand how black people don't find that a ridiculous insult.
Right. And I don't understand how Barack Obama wouldn't view that as an incredible insult. I mean, it's just, it's mind-numbing.
It is. And we're definitely live right now, but I've made one little tiny mistake, so people who are watching us on Crowdsource the Truth 2 need to back out to the main menu and they'll get to our current live stream. And you know, Charles, I'm actually testing something very important. I'm sorry to interrupt. I know you were about to flow.
That's all right.
But we had some reports from people last night that there was some streaming issues with the live stream going out to our generous Patreon and Subscribestar sponsors. So I'm conducting a little test with this broadcast, and I hope that people watching on patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth or subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth will give us some feedback here throughout the broadcast to let us know that it's playing smoothly. I've made some changes to try to fix that. It's a constant fight, Charles, against the technological gremlins and all the things that have to mesh together for this to work.
Well, keep up the good fight, my friend.
But you were saying the Lewis brothers. He's the first African-American president.
Yeah, and this movie, I mean, I used to watch movies excessively on the weekends in my various weekend homes, just because it was a way to kind of forget about all the minutia and detail of finance projects. And I just have to freely fess up to the fact that I'm a silly boy who likes silly comedies. And this movie, I would comfortably say I've watched it 50 times, easily.
And you don't strike me as the kind of guy who's watching movies lots and lots of times.
Well, you go way back to my 20s. I mean, it was a real novelty to when I got my weekend house. I got one of those in 80...
Betamax.
No. I got in 84 or thereabouts. I got a television set that was so big that it fit like big back.
But with the like the three circles of red, green, and blue reflecting on a mirror, that was like the super 80s.
No. I got a TV that was so big because in those days it had a big back.
Oh, the tube, you mean the huge CRT. The JVC 35-inch was the biggest CRT ever made.
It was this gigantic thing. So when I took it to my country house, we jammed it in the back of a 4-passenger, like the equivalent of an Audi today. And we were literally, the thing was so big, we were sort of in front of the steering wheel like this, and a miracle we didn't get picked up. And so what we would do is I paid my ex-wife's sister, who needed a job. I paid her to live in the house and run all kinds of errands and look after contractors, stuff like that. Very nice young lady who today actually is a judge in Arizona.
Wow.
And what we would do is, we get up there and we go to the local video store, and most people would rent a couple movies, and we'd rent like 50 movies.
Wow.
And we would, typically like maybe 30 movies and 20 cartoon reels. And we would watch a movie for as long as we could stand it, and then we'd have a cartoon and watch it. And in that way, we went through like a large number of movies. And we, ultimately started buying the ones that we thought were fun. And then, of course, my kids came along, and it wasn't a tough sell to get them to watch stuff like this. So this is a very entertaining movie, but the real-life documentary that we're talking about of a generation of misadventure that starts before Bill Clinton with George H.W. Bush and hopefully ends after Barack Obama with Donald Trump. These Lewis brothers, Bill and Barack, and their distant cousins, the father and son Bush, have put the world, certainly America and the world, through an experiment in sillyism. This unregulated globalism that has crushed the legitimate aspirations of people coming out of school, trying to pay up their student loans. They get crushed in the period, really 1989 to the present, by large debts on their student loans, and if they're buying homes, by soaring living expenses for the next generation, the cost of going to these top private schools and colleges soaring up. And people like Bill and Barack have gotten away through their presidential foundations with using the tax system while decrying the wealth of millionaires and billionaires. They're using this presidential foundation ruse to subsidize their lifestyle and using their connections with crooked, in my view, people at law firms like Williams and Connolly and elsewhere to feather their own post-presidential nests with way off-market book deals for themselves and their family members, way off-market speech deals, preferred investment deals, and they truly are, major league losers.
So you're saying they traded the Bluesmobile for a microphone?
Exactly, good one.
It's a cop car, got a cop engine, cop shocks.
They're going to have to take their full fried chickens home. But I think, some viewers have been impatient, but in the main, most of our viewers have been very patient. And I think they're growing to appreciate the magnitude of this scandal. When I got onto it in the beginning, having messed around with a GE that was close to $1 trillion, a scandal of $100 billion didn't seem that big to me. But then as we told the tale and did more work over the course of our many podcasts together, we're seeing that this Clinton and Obama and Bush and other presidential foundation scandal involving leaders around the world is certainly in the trillions of dollars. And we're also learning, I think, we've got breaking news we're going to cover, that people are finally standing up to take, and I use this word figuratively, of course, the kill shots that are required against the corrupt puppeteers who have made all of this crime and corruption possible going back decades. We're starting to see solid evidence of real moves in the direction we long hoped to see. So, fantastic work to the art department as usual.
Thank you.
It was nice of you to lend your car to this poster.
I haven't had a car in several years since I lived in Los Angeles, but I love it when they're driving through the shopping mall. New Oldsmobiles are in. Oldsmobile is totally gone now, Charles.
I know.
Oh, I was watching a documentary about Bernie Madoff, and when they got to the part about how they figured out what was going on. I mean, I'm sure you know this and probably know the guy. It was one guy who was going to all these people, and they were like, how could you possibly be right? All these other people are investing money.
Oh, Harry Markopolos, yeah.
Yes, and they spoke about how he was just like vocal. They had him in the documentary saying that he was, starting his car remotely and everything because he was worried he was going to be killed. He figured out that Madoff had been robbing Russian mobsters and Sinaloa cartel.
Right. Well, there have been several articles about me likening me to Harry Markopolos for the Clinton Foundation, and thank you, Myra Adams, for writing some of those. But she was, I think, the first to write them. But yeah, nothing like what happened with Madoff happened with me and GE, but when I first looked at GE back in 2006-07 timeframe, and concluded that I thought it was a massive fraud. I really did reach an initial decision that I might have gone crazy because it was just so unlikely for a company like GE, regulated around the world by so many exchanges and followed by so many stock and bond market analysts.
How could you possibly?
How could I see something that they didn't see? And I hadn't worked for 5 years. I've been spending my time, doing amateur history reading, going as far back to 1066 AD and reading scholarly journals about this and that and hanging around with young kids and going, it was certainly possible that I could have gone crazy, but I think history has proven that I didn't, and it certainly has proven that Markopolos didn't. And really, the simple thing to remember, and most advertising firms don't want you to remember this because they're in the business of coming up with slogans
to convince you to do stuff.
Yeah, that sound too good to be true. But if something sounds too good to be true, it fucking isn't.
Exactly.
It's that simple. I mean, it just isn't true.
Right.
And when you start hearing, Barack Obama, not to, jump down his throat for the 8 years of presidency, but when you start looking at his filings, which we're going to do in the forthcoming broadcasts again, and you see some yin-yang lawyer filing paperwork on Barack Obama's behalf stating that his presidential foundation, which is statutorily required to house the papers of his presidency, will not be housing the papers of his presidency. You don't have to be, much smarter than a third grader to say this is bullshit. I mean, it's just like
it's like when you go to a Broadway show and they come on the microphone right before and they're like, the role tonight of Barack Obama will be played by a kumquat. You're like, oh damn it, I came to see Obama.
oh, it's great, a kumquat too.
Yeah, I mean, well, what you just described about having your own thoughts of like, could I be going crazy? That's gaslighting, Charles, because all this external stimulus is coming at you saying, hey, this is the truth. GE is great. Prince Andrew isn't an insane liar.
Right.
No way Jeffrey Epstein was banging all these underage kids and throwing them out the back of an airplane.
Right.
And you're like, that's got to be crazy. How can any of that be right?
Well, yeah, because when you're on the frontier thinking about a big issue, GE's a big issue, Clinton Foundation's a big issue, who can you confide in? Who can you go? I mean, if your parents are still around, you can talk to them maybe, your siblings.
But even they sometimes say, you've got to be crazy.
I remember when I was changing your diaper.
Yeah.
I don't want to do that again.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, Charles, I think part of the reason why I chose to do this and why I'm able to kind of withstand all of the stuff coming at me is that I have always sort of been swimming upstream and zigging where everybody else was zagging. When I started making 3D movies, people literally were like, why are you doing that? That's crazy. Nobody's looking at 3D movies. And then in 2009, when Avatar was coming out, I was getting interviewed all the time by different, movie publications where they were like, well, you really predicted this digital renaissance of 3D. And I was like, yeah, sure. I was doing it for 10 years. People told me I was an idiot. I didn't predict anything.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the conventional, in quotes, wisdom becomes accepted by the large mass of humanity. And when you challenge conventional wisdom, you should expect a lot of blowback.
Pushback, yeah.
So anyway, great job on the poster. I mean, as we're pressed for time, perhaps we should jump
Just
right
go
into
right to the slides.
El Slido.
Yes.
But I think for excellent reasons, Barack Obama and his administration were up on a pedestal for a while, but for extremely bad reasons, which I think have been highlighted best by folks including Cheryl Atkinson, John Solomon, and others. When we go back, when there is enough distance to go back and look at the period January 20th, 2009, or really I think June 5th, 2008 to January 20th, 2017 and thereafter, when we're far enough away from that to have the tensions and the emotions of our present times dissipate, I think objective historians are going to look at this period and say there was not a period where a president and his team went as far over the line, punishing whistleblowers, punishing investigative journalists, breaking the law at every twist and turn, manipulating the system, driving America so far off course. There hasn't been a recent period of time this extreme as we've seen in the period. And I think we're going to go back, or a future generation will perhaps go back and examine some of these Kool-Aid drinking journalists like David Ignatius and Paul Krugman and Morning Schmo and those type of people. And they're going to look at this and they're going to say, this was the period of time when we lost our minds. This where humanity lost its mind.
Yeah.
We were prepared to tear up a medical system, admittedly flawed, and accept the ravings of Gruber and the lies of Obama. If you like your doctor, you can keep your doctor. I mean, how many times did he say that? And people will say, if you bring up Benghazi, that you're a maniac for saying that. But I mean, the Middle East is a smoking ruin right now. And it's not just Barack Obama's fault. I mean, it goes way back to Carter, perhaps before that. And
Kissinger and Nixon.
Yeah, and we're sitting there and here in this nice country. I mean, this country, 80% of the population lives in cities. We're a gigantic landmass with a lot of clean water. we are so underpopulated. When you really do the math and you say, how much population lives in the cities?
It's way too many people living right across the hall over there.
Exactly. But you know, it's not like these doom and gloom AOC sayers are saying, oh, the nation is so crowded, it's falling apart. I mean, we have never been less crowded when you think about it.
Really?
Sure, because when you take in the rural areas.
Well, right, it's an inappropriate distribution of whatever.
We're concentrated in the cities. We have a gigantic landmass. And we could easily encourage young people to have many more, have 3 and 4 and 5 children if they wanted to, and support the growth, robust growth in this country for a long period of time. But you never know that if you're listening to what passes for wisdom coming out of the Ivy League schools, that have been so corrupted by this Clinton, H.W. Bush, Clinton, Bush, Obama generation. And so Barack Obama gets picked out of obscurity. No one really, forget the Jerry Corsi arguments, but no one at the present has satisfactorily explained to me what Barack Obama did from graduation at Columbia until he entered Harvard Law School. Nobody has been able to tell me, forget the Columbia issue and Wayne Allen Root, who was at Columbia in his class saying, he's found no record of Barack Obama.
Wayne Allen Root says that he was
in his class.
And they never saw Barack Obama, no records, nobody knows. Yeah. That's pretty compelling.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, I went, as you know, I went to college in the slums in New Haven. I mean, the campus was very nice, but when I was there from 74 to 78, New Haven it wasn't like Watts, but it was not.
I don't think I knew that at all.
Yeah, the outskirts of the campus is like a movie set, but you just go.
The Skull and Bones.
Stop! Stop! Would you stop already?
Hey.
But so anyway, in that time, it was tough to get a job. Right out of college. I mean, and by '81, when he graduated from Columbia, the economy had not yet recovered. So here's a guy with an undistinguished high school record, an undistinguished transition from Occidental College, which was not a top school back in
Accidental College.
Yeah, accidental, right. To go from there to Columbia, and not go into either a big company or a consulting firm or a law firm as a paralegal or whatever, to work for some sketchy, some people say CIA front company.
Oh, BCCI or what is it?
No, it was
business
something company or whatever.
BIC.
Right, yeah.
Because David Hawkins calls it British Invisibles Corporation.
Right. So how did he get that job? What other job offers did he get? I know, I just happen to have an advisor who today is pretty famous, Stanley Greenberg, and I know that he would remember me, because I've spoken to him in the last decade or so. How come Jake Tapper and the crowd over at MSNBC and ABC and NBC, how come no one went back and said, all right, here's this real first African American president.
Half.
Right. Well, I'm just saying real. And do any of his professors remember him? I mean, it's certainly newsworthy to go back to college days and say, what was this guy like in college? And what did he do? How did he go from Columbia to get into Harvard Law School? I mean, it's not. Back then, it was not easy to get into Harvard Law School on a racial preference track or whatever. I mean, it was really, really tough. I mean, all of the top kids at Harvard and the Ivy League schools who were interested in not being scientists or doctors, all of them would apply to Harvard Law School and Yale Law School and stuff like that. So how did this guy with an undistinguished record end up at Harvard Law School? How did he become president of the Harvard Law Review? I mean, these are like basic questions, and nobody's got a straight answer. And if you ask a question like that, it's like Tucker says, you're a racist. It's not. It's not that. It's just I'm curious. How did he go from Hawaii, the Punahou School, which is kind of like the school I went to? It's a day school, I think, in Honolulu, and it's expensive. How did he go from there? If he were on a track to go to Harvard Law School, he would have been on a track from Punahou School to go to MIT or Yale or or Princeton. So how did he end up at Occidental? Right? I mean, and then you look at the graduates from his graduating class. Who are they and what happened to them? It'd be interesting.
All dead.
It'd be interesting though to go back and do some of that. Anyway, here's Barack Obama. For this broadcast, because we had some breaking news, we're not going to get into what we're going to cover in the next broadcast, which is going back over the timeline of how his presidential library came into being. A lot of times presidential libraries, when you're president of the United States, you can't have people reaching out and saying, why don't you put a whole bunch of money in my presidential library, because you could very easily break a number of different laws which do not permit public officials to solicit gifts. And so, but nonetheless, he put his presidential library together. And as a guess, he very much emulated Bubba and Hillary and Chelsea. And from memory, I think his presidential library was incorporated in 2014. So
I know you're laser beam focused always, and even more so today, Charles, but I need to ask if you are familiar with this particular photograph. It's one that David Hawkins and I have evaluated quite extensively, where Obama is giving some kind of lecture of some kind of analysis in the upper left, relationships built on self-interest. And he seems to be talking about corporations, banks, utilities, and then this thing over here, which has been erased and rewritten, appears to say DEGOP, which I can only think is some conglomeration of Democratic Party and GOP.
yeah, it could be.
So what the hell is he talking about here?
I don't know.
It's an interesting picture.
It is. It is. I wonder where he was doing this.
Well, these are the types of things that we get into on David Hawkins' Discovery CSI on Fridays at 1.
There you go. So he, no doubt, I think when we really crack, as I think has happened, when the FBI goes full Manafort, full Roger Stone, into the people who've been profiting from these crooked presidential libraries, I think we're really going to be able to flesh out the timeline, both the timeline of Barack Obama's emergence early into politics from Harvard Law School, as well as the timeline of, which I think is a critical timeline, from June of 2008, when Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama smoked figuratively a peace pipe at Dianne Feinstein House, through the decision to hire Hillary as Secretary of State, and then the evolution of their joint administration of American foreign policy and the aftermath of that through the age of Trump. So there's a lot of good stuff to tease out of that. One thing perhaps the crowdsourcers might be interested in helping us do, when I thought to punch in secretaryclinton.com to see into Whois, to see when that domain name was purchased by somebody.
Is that one of her email addresses?
It's not that, to date we haven't seen that, and it may be a different Secretary Clinton, but the date that pops up is certainly interesting. It's in June 2008. Now, all reporting that we've seen so far on the Hillary Clinton, the Barack Obama decision to appoint Hillary Clinton, isn't it June there?
It does appear to be, yeah. Here we've got
June 18th, okay, so that would fit into my timeline of they smoked the peace pipe in Washington, D.C.
for their joint effort.
Right, on June 5th or thereabouts, 2008, and it would make perfect sense to me for the Clintons to be saying, all right, Barack, you're going to be president, but this here's, you're going to have Air Force One and all that stuff. The White House is yours. But here are a few little things that are going to happen while you're president. She's going to be Secretary of State.
Yeah.
There's going to be no Inspector General. We get to appoint Eric Holder because we have him under control. He's going to be your Attorney General. He could say he's got your back.
Well, how did Clintons have Eric Holder under control?
Because Eric Holder was the one who concluded that it made no sense to, he was the U.S. Attorney who concluded, or on the staff of the U.S. Attorney, who concluded that it made no sense to indict Ira Magaziner for his role in lying in the healthcare fraud. He was the guy who approved the Mark Rich pardon, or he saw, he's...
Well, so that shows that they had him, but how did they get him?
I think it's the Clinton business model. They have a bunch of people around him. They They themselves most likely have been implicated in this. I know you had a recent show talks about some of this with Michael Moore. But there's a lot of instances of Bill crossing the line as a young guy, getting into compromising positions, and then he and Hillary, who knows what her early life was like and what compromising position she may have gotten herself into. And I think there's a business model of getting these striving up and coming people who want to be world leaders, liquoring them up or drugging them up, and getting compromising pictures of them or people who can make allegations that are credible against them. And suddenly you're banking on these strivers to become people who you then slot into positions of real power and authority going forward.
Yeah, and you know what? This was just picked up and played on InfoWars, so hopefully this will get some legs and go a little further. And I believe Mike Moore's purpose in putting this out was to remind the FBI, to protect the victim. And obviously we've gone to great lengths to hide his face and his voice, which some other people out there on the internet for unknown purposes want to reveal. We put this out because we wanted to spur the FBI to do something, to not just bury this, so that there will be more of a public call for there to be an investigation. The arrest and what's the word I'm looking for? The arraignment of those two guards from the MCC, who they are now being charged with conspiracy to cover up the death, the murder, whatever it was. That opens a really interesting legal question of what role is the New York Post playing? Did they do something to cover this up? If that picture of Epstein on the gurney is not in fact Epstein, I don't know.
You mean kind of like those Pete Buttigieg pictures of the African Americans who were worshiping him who turned out to be from Kenya, that kind of thing?
Something like that. I mean, what's their role in covering this up? If there is an FBI investigation into a cover-up, who knows where it starts and ends?
Well, so as we explained in the previous broadcast, that these law, and thanks, by the way, to the many viewers who sent me tweets or emails suggesting music that involves dirty laundry. And
I know that Don Henley song. I can't believe we didn't think of that.
Well, you didn't. Movies I remember, but I'm hopeless with song titles. I can't remember anything. But as we explained, these charities, I mean, when you say to somebody that, when they push you hard and say, well, what do you do? Yeah. After I get through with as little as possible, what do you really do? And you say, well, actually, I spend all my time as a philanthropist giving money away. Instantly, people say, oh, how noble. Your guard goes down. You're like, this guy must be something. I mean, he's giving away all his money.
Yeah, you don't tell them that you're giving it to mass murderers.
I don't tell them that I'm giving away none of my own money, and just some of the money that I don't steal that comes into this leaky internet-based pipe.
Right.
But I call myself a philanthropist. Next thing you know, I get this award for philanthropy and that award for philanthropy and whatever. And so it's just human nature, and it's almost like this is an area where I seldom would say something like this, and maybe I'll regret saying this in a second, but this is an area where I think it is so, there's so many fraudsters around charities that, like cigarettes, perhaps there should be a required warning label on any charity solicitation that runs something like this. Around the world, the volume of money that is sent towards charities, lawfully organized charities, vastly exceeds the demand for charity. It is impossible for the regulatory system today to check all these charities. Therefore, before giving any of your hard-earned money away to any charity, make sure you check the following. Some kind of warning like that needs to go. And then, any charity, there's certain types of charities that are especially likely to involve fraud. Any charity that mentions anything to do with children or animals,
really,
or disaster. Yeah, I mean, because your heart's
every charity, isn't it? Help the children, save the animals.
Yeah.
So
actually, there is. I was preparing for the slides and I didn't put this up here because we don't. And closing in, we don't do the funny what's just happening stuff. But there is actually a charity that's something like Save the Laundromat.
What?
It's called like
Actual laundromat?
Yes.
Why is that a charity?
I don't know. Or, the laundromat charity or something like that.
Huh.
Anyway, so we have, let's jump to the next slide. And thank you very much for now doing, I guess this is our 190th video.
Are we going to have a party for 200, for episode 200?
We
Charles?
should, episode 200.
We should do it somewhere special with hats and those horns, party streamers.
Yeah, we could do it in 15 Old Schoolhouse Lane in Chappaqua or something like that, instead of a picnic.
Is that their
there.
house?
Yeah,
Huh.
or something like that. No,
It would be cold. I
or
think.
Little Rock, or somewhere else. Anyway, more
It's
interesting.
creeping up soon. It's only going to be... Anyway.
Yeah. So as our regular viewers will know, this is a different approach that does involve, and we're so grateful to the many supporters, Jason, of your effort, and active viewers who come along with ideas and give us good constructive criticism. But this isn't an effort that is merely about listening to me and listening to Jason and our other guests. This is an effort where if you want to get involved, you can reach out to your congresspeople and your senators and your local FBI people and the IRS and other governments around the world. You say, hey, I mean, do you guys do anything except watch porn? I mean, here's a gigantic fraud. And governments around the world need money, because the tax revenues are not keeping pace with the rapacious interests that bureaucrats seem to have in spending our hard-earned money. So here's a massive fraud supported by a lot of very rich people. And the opportunity to go in here and wind this thing up, assess massive penalties, first against the organization and then against the donor.
Excise taxes.
And excise taxes. And the opportunity for the really entrepreneurial in various places around the world to go out using this material and try to get a bounty off of this should be pretty large. And
Yeah, particularly considering Bill put the rape in rapacious.
he did, exactly. So what we do here, rather than, we certainly take an opposite approch to Morning Schmo and Rachel.
Yeah, we haven't killed any interns.
Yeah, exactly, yet. Maddow and others, is we don't just simply lay our thoughts out there with no backup. For every presentation we have backup slides, most every presentation where you can see the links that we're referring to, you can check them yourselves. And what would be really helpful to us is if you like one or more of these shows, beyond supporting financially Jason's operation, would be to tell friends about it. Hey, I just ran across these guys and they don't seem to have anything better to do, and they just spent a lot of time talking about this Clinton Foundation fraud. Look at all these great posters that they have for every one of these things. They have been producing on a regular and consistent basis. The fraud is so big that after 192-hour podcasts, they still can talk about it. So, what the hell? What the hell are you guys doing at the IRS, the Department of Justice, and their equivalents around the world, and in state equivalents around the world?
And Charles, for some people who are having a little difficulty finding the slide presentations as they go back through the library, you might need to go right below the video here and notice that it says Show More. And if you click that, it brings you up to all these links, including this download Charles's presentation, which if you click on that, downloads the PDF to your computer where you can follow along as you watch or print it out, mail it to your friends, do whatever you want.
Yeah. And it's actually, for me, it's quite useful to have done all this stuff consistently. There, I think, is one where I did the italics the wrong way.
Oh, you're fired, Charles.
I'm going to fire myself. Like as somebody said to my former business partner, if you weren't my boss, I'd fire you.
It's like, get out of my office. You're fired.
Get out of my country. But anyway, so there's a lot of material here for people to look at, and really, once you go through this, once you actually look at source material, particularly with the guidance and help that we offer through these podcasts, you should be able, for yourselves, to reach the conclusions that are all the more telling when you engage your mind and your eyes and your brain, and you see this for yourself, and you see what the rules are, and you see how flagrantly the Clintons and the Obamas and others have broken the rules for how long. You really should come away with this and say, wait a minute, whether I'm a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent, in the largest country on earth, at a time where there's so much consequential movement in various directions and so many rising threats, we must in this country believe that no one is above the law, and moreover, that the law is administered fairly and blindly, not ignorantly. And when you say to the fraudster community, which is a large community, you know what? We're going to write up all these laws and regulations, and we'll let the suckers follow the laws and regulations. You, on the other hand, if you want to write, this kind of a ticket for, let's say, 100,000, we'll give you $1 million. You want to give us 10 million, we'll give you $1 billion. You want to give us this, because nobody's checking, and we have the access to do it, and let's go wild, because we're all dead in the end, and it doesn't really matter. Which is, I think, the book she's working
That's
on
a
now.
better title for the book. It doesn't even matter.
So, without any further ado, there's been some large breaking news, literally in the last 2 hours or so.
Yeah.
So we have explained patiently that there is a business model for fraud, for charity fraud, and it involves setting up a purported organization, but a non-profit corporation, but making sure that it has no controls. It has trustees who are conflicted as hell. They're making money off, either they're forestalling prosecutions against themselves or they're making money, or both. It typically involves families that are dynastic and interested in politics. So the Bush family, the Clinton family, the Obama family, maybe. It involves the real prize that everyone, when I first looked at this, I at first did not see what the real prize is, and I think I see it now. The real prize is picking the pocket of the international aid operations around the world, both the World Bank, the International Finance Corporation, and then nations around the world who can give money away. So you set up your presidential foundation or your prime ministerial foundation or whatever you want to call it, your kingly foundation, and you convince sucker foundations, private foundations, and sucker individuals to put money into something. And then you go to governments and you say, well, I'm a magisterial, presidential, upstanding foundation that'll be around forever into perpetuity. I'm just the person to work with you on climate change. And we'll convince, AOC and this idiotic sailor, Greta Thunberg, who's, finding out how difficult it is to sail to some place as opposed to actually flying.
She's a sailor?
Well, she was the one she was sailing, on her way sailing down to Chile for some environmental conference when the Chilean government fell, and they said, whoops, can't do that. So she's in the South Atlantic Ocean, and,
Isn't she like 12? She's
16,
a little kid.
yeah. She's an angry 16-year-old.
Oh my God, how is she?
And she had to then say, well, okay, how do I get back to Madrid, where the conference now is, on my sailboat? I mean, that's when you start.
She's just a little girl out there alone on the boat?
Of course not. She's got probably TV crews and other people helping her. But the point is, to the AOCs of this world with their Green New Deal, that we're going to take the moving platform over to Tokyo,
it's a train.
Train,
She's
exactly.
Take to Tokyo.
Go down to Grand Central Station. You see, use your
Metro North doesn't go to Shinjuku. Joe?
Take your abacus, and then wheel your bag of pennies to get out of there and purchase your ticket to Tokyo.
93 trillion in pennies.
Exactly. Why not?
It weighs more than the entire country.
But so the idea, though, is that you get typically involved in these presidential foundations in international things that nobody can check. So you tell people you're fighting climate change, who's going to know? You tell people you're fighting HIV/AIDS in countries where there are no roads, no hospitals, no doctors, there's no medicine, and it's really tough to get. I actually, long ago, 43 years ago, went on a long tour through West Africa and went into parts of countries that are now one country called Burkina Faso and Niger and stuff like that. Very difficult to get around. And you say to somebody, look, I know that you don't want to do this because there's no infrastructure, but my presidential foundation is going to set up an initiative to fight climate change in Niger. You could trust me. And guess what? We're going to raise not 100 million, we're going to raise $6 billion for that.
Wow.
And we're going to get it from these equally corrupt places, the World Bank and IFC and the IMF, or wherever we're going to get it, and international banks and whatever, and other charities. And we're going to tell everybody that we're doing all this great stuff. In reality, we do sweet fuck all, and split up the money. And we're all in this together, so nobody's going to rat out on us. And who is going to stand up to Richard Branson and Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush and all these other people?
Oh, wait a minute. So wait, $6 billion, the entire gross domestic product of Burkina Faso in 2018 was 14 million.
You're a quibbler.
Well, I mean, it just seems like one person could sort of double the budget of that country on a credit card.
Yeah, and that's where you get these pious fools who sit bemoan inequality. Here's Bernie Sanders sitting there talking about millionaires and billionaires and inequality. He's got 3 homes. He's not even a freaking Democrat, and he's in the Democratic primaries again. And these people who have piled up gigantic deficits in both parties don't understand basic arithmetic.
Bernie's more like Captain Kangaroo now. He's making like comedy videos with AOC. Oh, I didn't know you were here. Are we on Periscope? Oh. You should get puppets involved. That would make it more
be really big.
Little train could go through there, could read stories to AOC. It'd be good. Yeah. I should become Bernie's campaign manager.
You probably just let's get the Clintons first. But anyway,
right.
So comes a story in the last couple hours. If we hit this link, it was sent to us by our great friend Kevin.
Yeah.
And it also is. I didn't put up a version that is on Zero Hedge, or I did, I guess. So I didn't put this similar story up on Zero Hedge, but okay, here are members of parliament. While our members of parliament are wasting a lot of time and money at a crucial moment.
This is Ukraine parliament.
These are Ukrainian parliamentarians are demanding that their president and Trump investigate $7.4 billion alleged scheme. And if you go down this a little bit, this is the former president, the family of the former, remember we talked about dynastic thing. The family of the former president, Viktor Yanukovych, working in league with this very famous operation, Franklin Templeton Investments, in a scheme to slime money out of the $7.4 billion, involving people connected to the Democratic Party. I think when you dig on this, it's not just going to be Democrats, it's going to be never Trump Republicans and Democrats.
Well, it's definitely going to be Joe Biden. I think
it's going to be one of
them. You're like, I didn't know.
I didn't know. Yeah. Hey, Joe, announced a new suspicion to the notorious owner of Burisma, ex-ecology minister Zlochevsky, however you pronounce it.
Zlochevsky, yeah. Well, Dr. Corsi's been speaking about this guy for the past 3 weeks.
Yeah. So I really think if we were going to have international cooperation. Oh my God! Another fun-related character is Tom Donilon. He's a bad guy.
I don't know him.
Yeah. Oh yeah. He was a really bad guy in the Obama administration. I forget what his exact.
But Charles, what a contrast this is. That here's the country that everybody has been talking about. They're saying, yeah, by the way, there is $7.4 billion in corruption, and we need President Trump to help our president investigate. And meanwhile, Adam Schiff and all the idiots there in Congress are arguing about Trump doing something wrong. This is what the people of Ukraine want.
Right, and I think that's what the people of America want.
Right.
It's not what people of the swamp want. And I think, the various and sundry people, we'll talk about this in another presentation. A lot of the people testifying today in Washington, D.C. in the last several days are affiliated with something called the Atlantic Council.
Oh, yes.
And I think that there are other councils like that, typically bipartisan organizations, that they like this idea of these unregulated globalist schemes that sound fantastic. You can get some bonehead in near Oxford or Cambridge to write a fancy glossy report.
You don't have to go that far. We got domestic boneheads right here.
Well, but the English, there you go. But the English boneheads, they write quickly and they sound ever more sensible with us, except for certain former, current and former likely princes, Prince Andrew, which we don't need to talk about him. But you get some bunch of boneheads together to write the need for some big scheme and then write reports saying how well you've done with the people's money, never having checked any aspect of the real scheme and just accepting some payment and maybe a kickback from the people who are stealing all the money.
Hey.
So this is Atlantic Council stuff?
Yes,
there you
look
go.
at the step and repeat.
Yeah. And so it's these organizations, again, we keep going back to the idea that it's charities and that need a real, particularly internationally operating charities based in any country that has potential to raise serious money need to be regulated aggressively, and people perpetrating charity fraud need to go to prison and suffer very stiff penalties, especially if they include the former Vice President of the United States or even the former President of the United States.
Well, and that Zlotchevsky guy, I think, is the guy who's just been indicted, right? He's the former head of Burisma.
The owner, I think.
Well, he's been indicted.
Yeah.
So that's
Why
not
would we
good.
look into that?
Yeah, I mean, this is preposterous. Trump must be impeached. He's actually trying to prosecute crimes.
Yeah,
we can't have that.
I
We
mean,
need Adam Schiff in charge.
When we find out about the Clinton Foundation crimes, we just bury that. We buried it, down in the basement between 2001 and 5, and then when it came up in 2009, we put it in the sub-basement, and when it came up in 2015, we put it in the sub-basement below the mess from Fukushima. But like the mess from Fukushima, that stuff's floating all over the Pacific and the oceans, and I think we're beginning to see the stench, the toxic stench, that I hope is going to come right back to these two gentlemen, in quotes, and their families and their advisors.
Have you ever in history, Charles, seen something so incongruent with fact that, with what's happening now in Congress is so, it's comical. It's so
Right.
far out from the reality of the situation. There was an exchange in the hearing just this morning where I forget who the congressman was, but he's like, hey, on CNN right now, it says you have implicated the president in quid pro quo. Did you say that? And he's like, I already testified. He's like, say it again. Did you or did you not? And he cornered the guy into saying that it was just his perception that that's what happened. Nobody told him that.
It's
He
my
had no
reality.
evidence of that. Right.
It's my reality. It's what I think.
But what kind of testimony is this? I mean, this is exactly the same tactic that's being used in these lawsuits against me. They make something up and they keep saying it and they put it into some kind of official forum and they feel like that gives it credibility. But in this case, they actually have the opportunity to mess up the election and screw up the president. It's dangerous.
We shall see. I think we're at a pivotal moment, actually. Today will end up being quite a pivotal moment. Now, this idea of there being a large Clinton Foundation scam, I don't know that we've put this up before, but this is an interview I did with some folks who actually look at fraud primarily. I did this May 23rd, 2016. I was not responsible for the title, but this is one of the first times, you remember this issue of Harry Markopolos?
They're calling you Harvard MBA guy?
That's me, yeah.
It's a little bit of an odd title, but okay. Now, Harry Markopolos.
That's the guy who exposed Madoff. You just brought it up in the beginning.
Right.
There are several articles
yeah.
that liken me to him.
Yeah, I just heard of him for the first time this morning.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, Charles, it made me think of you right away. Because that's exactly, I mean, his story was sort of the same.
Yeah, and it's when you identify a massive thing that could, should have caused Hillary Clinton to lose the 2016 election. Now, did that happen? I think it did.
Yeah.
It happened because Trump and others working with him waged a fantastic campaign. But now there's a few stories here. We put up the shaky foundations before. We may not have put the Daily Caller up before, but there are many stories that came up prior to the election, a number of which mentioned Ukraine and mentioned connections to Ukraine, to Ukraine's Viktor Pinchuk.
It's the hot country. I think before a few weeks ago, most people didn't even know about Ukraine.
And as Tucker said, I mean, it really is, when you listen to these blowhards in testifying, who happened actually to be former Ukrainian people like Vindman, say, absolutely, the number one priority of the United States is defend the interests of Ukraine. What?
Yeah.
I mean, what about, let's think, Mexico? We have a border with Mexico, that wall idea that you got elected on. I mean, are you doing that yet?
They are.
What about Cuba, or as John F. Kennedy would say, Cuba?
Yep.
What about
China,
and a whole bunch of other places. But the point is, there were quite a few stories, and I've only put a few up. But look at this story from ABC News. This is...
Oh, boy. It's not about Epstein, I can tell you that.
Yeah. No, this is a story that appears November 23rd. Brian Ross, who ultimately had to leave, linking Ukraine to Trump, right? I want to know how that story was fed into the ABC pipeline. I want to know who brought it to ABC. I want to know who did the research on it. And isn't it curious that this guy, Brian Ross, would make such a huge deal about this so quickly after the election and not seem to give a shit about Victor Pinchuk's relation to the Clintons and Victor Pinchuk's work with Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS initiative that doesn't exist. I mean, you don't care at all about this. And by the way, the number of stories, and I tried to get to Brian Ross, by the way, in 2015 and 16 through Peter Smith, a friend of Peter Smith's. You know, I had a lot of my detailed research went directly to his team. And it was like, we don't investigate, the Clintons.
Yeah.
They're the ones who pay us. Why would we investigate them?
Wow. That's really something, Charles.
Then more recently, there's a large number, this one here, there are a large number of interviews that I've had the pleasure of doing with Katya Blainova. This is one that came out, if you go down the page a little bit, I think in, this is November 22nd, 2017. So this is just as Mueller is ratcheting up pressure against various and sundry people and thinking he's going to take Trump out before the midterms. We had this story going out that mentioned Pinchuk, mentioned Ukraine.
What domino effect was she referring to, taking down criminals all over the world?
Yeah. I mean, this is, you have to look at this. People make a gigantic mistake, I think, the investigative journalists, just focusing on the individual crime. It's like a serial killer.
Right.
It's bad, obviously, when somebody's murdered, but it's even worse if that person has been traveling around the world and has murdered 15,000 people, or let's say, as Chairman Mao, millions of people, tens of millions of people. You don't want to just get Chairman Mao for one person. You want to expose the magnitude of the crime. And, if you're not even going to look at it,
then you're Brian Ross.
Then you're Brian Ross, and you're Dan Idiot Rather, and Jake Tapper, and other people. And Maggie Haberman, who I looked straight in the eye, gave her chapter and verse, gave her everything. It's like, well, we don't investigate that. That might touch my father-in-law. We can't do that.
Who's her father-in-law?
Father-in-law is a famous guy called Vartan Grigorian, who is an American success story, an immigrant from Armenia who came and quickly got a PhD at Stanford eventually, became an academic, head of the New York Public Library, big gun at University of Pennsylvania. Then he runs the Carnegie Foundation, or he did run the Carnegie Foundation, and he's on the board of the Hunter Foundation, which is the Clinton Hunter thing. And he's in multiple accounts, he's
the Hunter Biden Foundation.
The Hunter Inmate Foundation.
Right.
But anyway, Katya and I have done. What she does is she sends me questions, and I try to answer them, and she then typically takes a portion of my answers and weaves them together in story after story. We've done over 100 different interviews like that, sometimes alone, sometimes with other people, trying to tell this story. And one of the reasons I was very happy to do this is I wanted to make sure that the gigantic Russian audience for Sputnik focuses on the hard facts and doesn't get lost in reflexive thinking that, if America's attacking Russia, then we're just going to attack America for no reason. Right. Take a look at what's really going on here. And here we predict back in 17 that you might get to Ukraine, and more recently in the other one that's below it,
on the slide?
Yeah. We have one that came out several weeks ago, and I believe there are more coming. This is October 5th. And I think ultimately, and this is starting to happen, people are finally going to go back, and when we think about the vitriol that goes against Rudy Giuliani, we have to remember that Rudy Giuliani was the point person who prosecuted Mark Rich. He was on this fraud and corruption involving investment schemes way, way back.
So the Clintons have wanted to sink him for 30 years.
Oh yeah, remember he was going to run against Hillary, and Hillary laughed for Senate, and Hillary laughed when he got prostate cancer. She laughed at him. Try to make him, you're a lesser person, you lightweight. And there's bad blood between the Clintons and Giuliani for good reasons.
Wow. Well, I enjoy laughing at Hillary when she falls downstairs and, smashes her face into the ground and stuff like that, but it's only because she's caused so much misery for so many people.
Right, and again, history is going to, I hope, judge these people and this horrible human being who, really needs to atone. I don't think it will be possible in 3 lifetimes to atone for the sins of this corrupt person. I really don't. And to think, the very person who is an immigrant to the United States of America,
Right.
who obviously didn't like Hungary all that much, otherwise he would still be living in Hungary.
Well, they had a bit of a war going on there.
Whatever, it didn't seem to faze him. He turned in his, fellow Jewish.
He was working for the Nazis.
He's working for a nice guy, and we welcome him. And he says, okay, thanks for welcoming me. What I'm going to do now is try to break every government I know of, including your own, and sow the seeds of dissension worldwide. And for that, you should probably give me the Nobel Peace Prize.
I don't understand why some of these countries that want him in jail haven't worked out some sort of a deal to make that happen.
Right. Now, this other Zero Hedge piece here, I think you might have hit the wrong one.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
You're
the very bottom one.
Oh, this?
This, yeah. This came out recently as well in Zero Hedge, and again, I commend to our viewers Zero Hedge. This is at 1224, and here they say that
Don't say his name.
I won't. It wants to. The FBI supposedly is reaching out to this whistleblower, and I think you have to reach out to him. And the fact that we're treading on tenterhooks here, not saying the name,
It's ridiculous.
Remember when with Rachel, I won't say what I would say, but Maddow, when she breathlessly teased the idea that she had gotten Trump's tax returns.
Right.
And
all
then,
it showed was that he was making like hundreds of millions of dollars. She's
Yeah,
like,
he is
he's
really successful.
Doing quite well. Congratulations.
Yeah.
She looks so stupid.
I know.
More than usual.
Yeah, I mean, so on the one hand, stuff when you people's tax returns are confidential, and when you leak those to the press, you're making a mistake and possibly committing a crime. And we go right into that. No problem with that. Lord help you if you mention the name of this whistleblower. I mean, how could you? Why is it reasonable to think that a person who I believe this whistleblower, somebody was telling me, maybe it was you, Jason, who was pictured the night of the Trump victory. He's in one of those pictures where everyone's crying.
I don't know if I saw that.
It was somebody else telling me that. But the idea that there could be a partisan who is trying to break the law and concoct a scheme to take down the President of the United States using lawfare, using social engineering, is so preposterous as to be a vast right-wing conspiracy. Now, who has used that defense before? Let's just think. Did Hillary Clinton use that defense in 1992 when Jennifer Flowers came? I mean, is it somebody who uses that kind of defense? Would she use it once successfully and say, "I'm never going to do that again"?
Yeah.
So when we think about it, and it's never Trumpers too, but how many Clinton allies, the Jeffrey Sachses, the Podestas, and others, have been high-tech looting former Soviet and Eastern Bloc and other vulnerable countries around the world? How many people have been doing this since the era of advanced, unregulated globalism? And I'll tell you, it's a lot of people. And it's really, these people become phenomenally wealthy. They likely don't declare their full income and wealth inside this country. They leave a very bad taste for America around the world. And people look at this, I think, outside this country and say, why America's no better than we are. They're big institutions and politicians are as crooked as we are. This damage is really something, and that's why when we hear Barr, we talked about this last presentation, stand up at a Federalist Conference Society dinner and say, this resistance stuff is outrageous, and we've got to make examples of what happened, find out what truly happened, and punish those who may have committed crimes.
And they're like, oh, impeach him too.
Exactly.
He's a Trump surrogate. He's trying to uphold the law. We can't have that. This guy's supposed to be the Attorney General.
Imagine that. He's not. Anyway, so the next page. There's been a hell of a lot of reporting in the last 24, 48 hours. But if you look down the list of these different elements, you don't see CNN, MSNBC, ABC, CBS, NBC, none of these people who are happy to devote hours and hours and hours to the Trump Foundation, anything wrong with any Republican. Nobody wants to look at the public record of the Clinton Foundation, which stinks to high heaven. And these various articles, people I commend for your reading, more or less all of them say that this Clinton Foundation, after it became obvious that Hillary Clinton was never going to be more than an incredibly annoying, angry.
It's a much kinder adjective.
I'm just trying to. I have children and friends who are younger, so I like to keep this. I don't like to curse with the words I have in mind, but this person, when it became obvious that she would never be president of the United States in the near term.
And she'll be dead in the long term.
In the near term, perhaps. But when that became obvious, the donations to the Clinton Foundation plummeted.
Yeah.
That's what these people focus on. They miss the idea that there is no charity called the Clinton Foundation.
Right.
I mean, it's like, yeah, they put these reports out, and the numbers, the trends are horrible. A lot of minutia about, it lost 30 million in each of the last 2 years.
That's 33.
It's actually 60. But.
Well, I'm talking about the way they do these coded things.
Yeah.
2 30s is a 33 message.
All right. But when they talk about it, and actually I want to make one point. Very few charities, particularly public charities, and very few corporations for that matter, are happy losing money. But in the case of a charity, when your spending exceeds your donations in a given year, you're necessarily liquidating assets or borrowing to fund that loss. And as a trustee, you have to be very careful when you do that kind of stuff that you are not either taking an asset that should be devoted to the actual authorized exempt purpose and using it for an unauthorized purpose. You also have to make sure if you're going to go to a bank that you don't commit bank fraud, but that's how the Clintons roll. Bank fraud is like, that's what we do.
We're not actually going to go to the bank. We just mail stuff to an address down the street and say it's the bank.
Exactly.
What do you need the bank for?
So you have, a lot of reporting here, and Fox Business did some good work, and some of these
Maria
other
Bartiromo, probably.
I don't think so, but I didn't check it. But actually, this all came out today, November 20th. Most of it came out today, November 20th. If you just hit this shameless self-promoting link here, you have, if you haven't had the opportunity out there in Viewerland to go through this presentation that we did on the 17th, we took this, if it actually hit the show more thing in the presentation.
Ooh. Yeah, sorry, I just ran into a problem here.
That's all right.
Oh, over here, yeah.
Yeah. You could see, the viewers can see that if our presentation is up there.
Do you want the slides?
Yeah, please. They don't seem to, yeah.
At the top.
People can go and see for themselves that we went through 17 different slides, or 16 different slides, I guess. Whole bunch
19.
of detail. Well, but just on the Clinton Foundation was 16, I think, or 15. But anyway, there's a tremendous amount of detail laying it out for you, way before even these valiant firms did it. That this thing is a complete fraud. And once again, Cohn-Resnick has actually jumped into the same league as BKD, because all the work here is built on the crooked foundational work done by, audited by BKD and then, quote, audited by Price Waterhouse. But it's Cohn-Resnick who did the most recent audit and sort of missed the fact that this Clinton Foundation, which is supposed to be a public charity not controlled by any one family, is instead dominated by Bill and Chelsea Clinton, and arguably with the puppeteer in the background swilling Chardonnay and yelling at people, Hillary Clinton. They missed all that.
I want to get my hands on this tiger suit and go to the next Hillary Clinton book signing dressed as Truman the Tiger. She'd be like, "What are you doing here? You're supposed to be dead." Truman the Tiger is going to get Clinton Arkansas.
That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
So if we go back into the other slides.
Oh, I was confused. I thought that was, there we go.
And the next one.
The next slide. There we go.
All right, so this is, a little bit of numbers work. This is, we've explained this to the viewers in the past, that I am now going to explain very quickly why the Cohn-Resnick balance sheet, which is the one, some would say is perhaps the most important financial statement produced, is a crock of shit. And that's
technical
accounting. Yeah.
There, Charles.
So
speaking over people's heads.
Right. So the balance sheet this is the balance sheet in theory that existed for this Bill, Hillary, and Chelsea Clinton entity, which I would argue was never organized and therefore is not a corporation that could be audited in the first place. At December 31st, 2018, it had one pile of assets and liabilities that was, think of it as your checking account, unrestricted. You're just sitting there, you do with it whatever you want, right?
Right.
Then it had another pile of assets and liabilities. Think of it as, let's say, a house that you borrowed, taking out a gigantic mortgage against. That's restricted, and you don't have the same freedom to do with that pile of assets and liabilities what you would have with the unrestricted piece. But do they bother to do that math for you and present a balance sheet that divides the information up into those two categories the way they should? No. So I had to do it, and this is my estimate using some of the footnotes, and it's notionally correct. I mean, it's probably, I didn't fill in all of these.
It's your presumption, Charles.
It's my presumption. It's my reality. It's my truth. Every one of these numbers foots precisely to the declared numbers in this fake audit done by Cohn-Resnick and accepted by the fake trustees who are actually in name as trustee of
Cohn-Resnick is the law firm?
Accounting firm,
Okay.
the auditing firm. So I put a few numbers in red just to make this interesting and to say, there's two very important numbers. One is the value of the endowment, which is $197 million at the year end, and 198 of the assets are restricted. So, a large percentage of the restricted assets is the endowment. So the first question as you're sitting there, I know the Cohn-Resnick people must be very busy and spending a lot of time trying to get invited to Chappaqua to look at Bill Clinton's sculpture collection, or who knows what they're trying to do. But the first question they should be asking is, does the Clinton Foundation have any legal authority to have a general purpose endowment?
Which is the endowment there?
198,204, it's included in there. 197, 210, 749 is the value of the endowment right
So
there.
who gave them that $200 million?
A whole bunch of grifters trying to grift through the Clinton Foundation as a guess, and dupes, right? So that's a very important number, and if you're sitting there conceptually thinking about auditing a charity, after you get done answering the first question, is it a charity? Of course, nobody checked that, because it's not, but you would then say to yourself, does it have, it would seem that like 69% of the net assets of this charity are in something called restricted, basically most of it's in an endowment. Does it have any legal authority to operate an endowment is one question you might ask. And then another question, you can see this other big asset, 87 million, that's this land, property, and equipment out in Little Rock. And you would ask yourself, does the charity, do they ever do a real valuation of that land, property, and equipment out in Little Rock? Are we sure that's a real number? Of course, Cohn-Resnick said, I don't do that kind of work. I'm an auditor.
IMAX theater, it must be real.
Yeah, I'd have to go out to Little Rock to do that work. I'm not doing that.
Yeah.
So, this is basically two assets will tell you all you need to know. A close scrutiny of these two assets will tell you all you need to know. You don't have to study the exchange rate to the Democratic Republic of the Congo currency or look into some complex, set of details and footnotes. You just have to ask, does it have the legal authority to run a big endowment? And is this property and equipment fairly stated? If the answer to either one of those questions is no, you should be able to say, I can't audit this. This is not a real foundation. But Cohn-Resnick didn't say that. They said, we're all in. We are going to do this. We are going to put the dynamite on our back. We're going to join the Clintons jumping out of the back of the 727 over someplace in Africa.
D.B. Cooper style.
D.B. Cooper style, and hope the dynamite doesn't get us before the interns rescue us in the savannah.
Dynamite?
That they're going to put on their backs. They'll jump out.
Oh, yeah, he had a bomb with him.
Right.
Yeah.
So I hope, for people who are not as comfortable necessarily with numbers, you see right away that you didn't have to write a 40-page report on the Clinton Foundation. All you had to do was answer two simple questions. So since they didn't answer those questions, why don't we help it? Let's go to the next page. Okay, so whether you can have an endowment or not is a function of two important things. It's a function of what's in your articles of incorporation, which are the governing document, the key governing document, that the IRS normally looks at when figuring out is this a legitimate charity. And it's also a function of what you told the IRS to get your tax exemption. Now, what I did here is I took some liberties changing the order of the language in the Clinton Foundation Articles of Incorporation, the purposes section. But one of the most important things is it says, this is an organization, okay, which no, it wasn't, because it didn't have bylaws agreed, and Hillary and Bill Clinton were making a joke out of it in the period by November 7th, 1997, less than a couple of weeks or thereabouts. After the time that they incorporated this thing, Hillary and Bill from Washington, D.C., not registering their involvement with the Clinton Foundation or the existence of the Clinton Foundation in Washington, D.C., they're deciding where the Little Rock Library, where the Clinton Foundation is going to be based. They're doing all kinds of things, directing traffic. There's no organization here. So it's not an organization, but
it's a disorganization.
It's a disorganization. But it's specifically something that Cohn-Resnick omits to discuss in their audit. It is other than a private foundation, by reason of being described in Section 509A. That may sound like nerdy bullshit, but that's a very important point. This is not a foundation that can be controlled by a family. It is a public charity which must be independent from Bill and Hillary Clinton, its creators. Okay, and Cohn-Resnick cannot believe that this thing is actually independent of the Clintons, unless they're really bonehead stupid. I mean, which I don't think they are. I think they must have one or two smart people at Cohn-Resnick. So that's the first step. This thing has to be a public charity. It ain't a public charity, okay? Then it can engage in activities that are, most importantly, permitted to an organization. They can't engage in these activities that Bill and Hillary want to do or Ira Magazine want to do on their whim. It has to be activities that an organization, independent from the creators, say further the actual specific purposes of the Clinton Foundation. Okay, now, this piece is later on in the actual section. I think they purposely wrote this to confuse people. First step, it's got to be a public charity. Next step, it's got to be an organization following activities that further the exempt purposes of the thing. And you see this in furtherance of the foregoing purposes and objects, but not otherwise, right? You can do what you want, provided that the use of the assets is applied to the exempt purposes of the corporation. You cannot, in this language, this is a presidential library, and there's this in the statute. It specifically contemplates the need to raise an endowment to give that endowment over to the National Archives. That purpose, that kind of specific endowment is authorized, provided you at all times are still a 509A charity, a public charity, and you're raising money and spending money to further the purposes of creating this thing in Little Rock. All right? The trustees, and there are no directors legally of the Clinton Foundation, as far as I can tell, because they didn't amend their articles to turn their trustees into directors. The trustees of this, in quotes, Clinton Foundation have never amended these purposes, though they could have. They had tons of money and lawyers are all over the place. They have never amended the purposes to say that they're going to do stuff outside Little Rock, and it would have been a simple matter to do it. They could have, in the run-up to the donation of the interest to the National Archives by November 18, 2004, after Bush won re-election, and when the invitations are in the mail, everybody's going to get to there, they should have said, hey, George, look, we got a problem. Some little housekeeping stuff, but things didn't go exactly according to plan here, and a few of our people
may have roadkill for the barbecue.
Done something to someone, and we need to basically change the authorized purposes of this foundation. You think you could see your way clear now that you won re-election to just working with us at the Little Rock, with the IRS to do all this? No, they didn't do any of that. And this doesn't say the deeper language in here does not say that you can take money out of the Clinton Foundation that you may have raised and just give it to anybody. You've got to give it to an organization. And Clinton Foundation HIV/AIDS Initiative was not an organization. Many of these things weren't organizations. So, you look at this, and again, this is, we're minutes into this portion of the presentation, and somebody who, and again, there must be a serious partner at Cohen-Resnick and a serious managing partner of the place and serious people who care about their reputation and about their potential liability for reckless conduct. A serious accountant who understands charity would say these guys failed the organizational and operational tests a long time ago. Forget about reporting on 2017 and 18. But no, they didn't do that. So let's go to the next page. So just looking at the Articles of Incorporation, you could say that they're dead. DOA. They're putrid. They're rotting.
Putrefaction.
Right.
Charles.
There's nothing left. They're just dry bones. And they may or may not be white at this point. They could be very gray. So when they went to the IRS, and remember, here you have Williams and Connolly. The law firm is owed a boatload of money, millions of dollars by the Clintons. When
That's David Kendall?
David Kendall, they allow their firm and their names to be affixed to applications which are put in under penalties of perjury that basically say to the IRS, look, we're going to initially endow. That's it. Initially endow. It doesn't say we're going to have a general purpose endowment. It says we're going to initially endow the presidential facility. The library and all related facilities are going to be located in Little Rock, not in New York, not in Boston, not in Africa or anywhere else. And we're going to set this up and give the facility and its endowment. Here it doesn't say its initial endowment. And its whole endowment is going to be given to the federal government, which happens before November 18th, 2004. So by its plain terms out here, this Clinton Foundation does not have the authority to set up a general purpose endowment. But Hillary's like, F that. I need to get reelected. I need to get elected as president. I've got to have a pretext for raising money. So they begin raising a lot of money.
Anecdotal stories, Charles, have revealed that the Clinton Foundation is pretty well endowed, but apparently it's crooked.
To the left, I believe. Yeah. So here on the question of that other big asset, these are the components of the supposed net property and equipment. Now, what's missing, Jason, in here? This is an unfair question, but I'm going to give you a chance to win it. A++. If you just read, I'll give you the hints. Read the categories.
Well, we've got furniture and equipment, it doesn't have stolen furniture and equipment.
But what category
and
might be missing from a library that is on 27 acres in Little Rock?
How about maintaining the grounds?
Land is not listed here.
Yeah.
So no one has.
How'd they buy that land?
Well, exactly. No accounting firm has ever stress tested or accounted properly for the land that on which the Clinton Foundation sits. And this is a critical error of every accounting firm associated with this. But really, why does this thing need $11 million worth of furniture? That's a hell of a lot of furniture.
It is.
I'm aware of furniture that is extremely valuable.
Nothing in here.
I wasn't going to say anything. But
This chair is the most expensive.
But $11 million, you got to have one hell of a lot of furniture to have $11 million worth of furniture. And where the hell is all that furniture? Why would you need so much furniture in this facility? It should be in Little Rock. If it's not in Little Rock, where is it? Might it be in New York? What the hell is all this furniture?
In their house in Chappaqua. What if it's like one couch worth $5 million?
Right, it's deeply suspicious. No one's ever stress tested. We've been over this issue that just because you spent money to construct a facility in Little Rock doesn't mean it's worth that amount. Anyway, this number's bogus. Let's fly, because I know we're pressed for time. If you go to the next page.
Oops, sorry.
It's okay. Yeah. Now, this actually is for people to read later, but this is exact language lifted from the Cohen-Resnick footnotes. They would say it's management footnotes, but this is exact language that describes all of these supposed initiatives, okay? And then says in most of them what they did with them in 2018, right? And the language at the end after the quote is me. The Clinton Foundation never obtained authority to operate Clinton Climate Initiative, Clinton Development Initiative. There are more specific problems with Clinton-Giustra Enterprise Partnership, but the language that is in quotes is lifted from most of the language that's in quotes. I see a small typo here, but the language that is in quotes and or is not in uppercase italics is directly from the Cohn-Resnick audit, and it's all wrong. I mean, they may have gone down the road of saying, well, why don't we get some idiot at the Clinton Foundation to sign a letter saying that this is true, and we'll rely on that without checking anything.
People in the comments are wondering what Doyle and Moynihan are up to. Are we allowed to discuss it?
We don't really know what they're up to.
That means no.
You're quick, Jason. So if we go to the next page, it goes on. They describe the Clinton Global Initiative. That doesn't exist. Health Matters Initiative. And what the hell is the difference between the Health Matters Initiative and the Health Access Initiative?
What about the health? What difference does it make at this point anyway? Foundation.
And this too small to fail thing, I mean, they're really good. They must have like a slogan department at the Clinton Foundation. You know, we need a slogan to come. The same people who come up with, ready for Hillary and the political campaigns and all this kind of stuff. Hopefully not maybe it's the same team that did the advertising campaign in South Dakota.
Oh yeah, we've got meth or something like that.
No, it's meth. We're on it.
Yeah, I saw that.
I mean, nobody sits there going, huh?
Yeah.
That's not a good
Well, whatever
idea.
slogan department Hillary Clinton has, Donald Trump has the anti-slogan department in his head, and it's 10 times better.
Exactly. So none of these initiatives are actually authorized at all. Now, we've gone through 2 pages of them so far. Go to the next page, and we have a few more. The alliance, we've done shows on it, was started in 2005 illegally, operated since then. We talk about this presidential center. It has never had a real independent valuation, which it needs.
So that's the actual library.
In theory, yeah.
Clinton Presidential Center.
So other than, not knowing.
Isn't that kind of telling that they don't call it the Clinton Presidential Library because it's got an IMAX theater and a bar and a lounge? It's not exactly a library, but I like it.
Yeah, it's the William J. Clinton Presidential Recruiting Center recruiting center for Victoria's Secret models.
Right.
Oh, I don't want to bring that up. Don't want to talk about Epstein.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's important. The next thing you have to ask yourself, and these are sort of basic questions. You say, all right. The key requirement for getting an audit is you have to get an independent audit. So you don't go and say, to make it simple, you don't say, all right, Bill and Hillary are sitting around, they've shaken Hillary awake, put her through a cold shower, told her she can't have any Chardonnay until 8:30 in the morning, and they're sitting around wondering, what the hell do? We got to get an audit. We got to get somebody who will say that this thing is actually legitimate. Why don't we get, Diarrhea Head, Chelsea to write it? Well, that wouldn't work because she's our daughter, or at least she's one of our daughters. Anyway.
Not an accountant.
Right. So the point is you've got to get somebody who's truly independent. The idea of an auditor is that, in simple terms, the idea of getting an independent audit is to get somebody who has no connection
to reality.
No connection to this entity, so they can come in and say, we're not dependent on your fees, we're not beholden to you. We are going to tell you, we have the ability to say this is a fraud if we believe it's a fraud, and we have the obligation, actually, an auditing firm, to report you to the authorities if we believe it's fraud. You don't take a firm. You see, in 2015, when we were ramping up issues against the Clinton Foundation, they initially said, we don't have to refile, we don't have to do anything. Then they hired who? Cohn-Resnick to go in, and they made a big deal on the Clinton Foundation fact sheet, which the link is there, saying that the lawyer that was asked to study that, who was clearly not independent, hired Cohn-Resnick, a CPA firm that had not previously worked with the foundation. That's truly independent. You're in theory competent, and you hadn't worked with the Clinton Foundation. Okay, and then based on the work of Cohn-Resnick in 2015, this idiot Kathy Keneally, and not her law firm, DLA Piper, says, I advised the foundation that it had no legal obligation to file amended returns. That's the kind of thing that you can get. That kind of statement, if we were to go around the corner in front of the pizza place and say to one of these guys who's on the corner,
yeah.
We've got this thing over here.
Pizza place.
I know you can't sign anything. Just an X will do. Just sign this thing over here saying that the foundation has no legal obligation to file amended returns, and we'll give you a whole pizza pie. And the guy said, with a six-pack? Six-pack included, no problem. I mean, this is ridiculous. Law firms, you see DLA Piper didn't sign this. The Clinton Foundation characterized Kathy Keneally as having said this. There's no evidence that Kathy
what does that mean, characterized? Is that some legal?
When you're looking at, when you need a legal opinion, right? Mm-hmm. You say, all right, I'm not going to accept a piece of paper that says form of legal opinion. I'm not going to accept something that isn't signed. I'm not going to accept something that isn't on the letterhead of the law firm by somebody I know and I can check, signing on behalf of the firm. Typically, opinions like that are signed DLA Piper, right? And by a partner. And you go to that partner and you check.
They're responsible for it.
Well, you check with the managing partner. You say, did a committee approve this? Is this just some lone wolf partner? For the Clinton Foundation, many lawyers involved with this. In 2015, remind you, this is when the Inspector General of the intelligence community has directed the FBI to investigate Clinton Foundation. This is mishandling of classified information. People are beginning to investigate the Clinton Foundation. And here are people around the Clinton Foundation putting together this supposed fact sheet that's rubbish. It's misleading the public. There's nothing signed from Kathy Keneally.
Oh.
It's just saying this quote is attributable to Kathy Keneally. I mean, that's
Anything
like saying,
is attributable to anyone. It might not be accurate, though.
It's a sort of same like Epstein, the way he was recruiting all these girls, supposedly. The latest accuser is saying that his line was, why don't you come on over to my mansion and, I can get you a modeling contract. Next thing you know, because I don't.
It's for somebody else, but I'll get it for you.
Yeah, exactly. Whatever. The fact that I can get you the modeling contract is attributable to the owner of Victoria's Secret, Les Wexner, who will do anything I ask.
But it also doesn't mean you're actually going to get hired for any job.
No, hell no. It's just it's Hollywood, man.
Yeah.
So this firm. The opinion is bunk. It is not independent. It's not a real opinion. It's not stress tested. And any trends seen in the numbers by all these different articles are meaningless because there isn't a real organization that is duly organized and validly constituted in every legal jurisdiction where it has been soliciting funds and operating since inception. There is no such entity associated with the Clinton Foundation. And so to take a risk as Cohen-Resnick and say, we're not going to put income tax liability on this. We don't see an income tax liability. And worse, they do, for the first time in the balance sheet, they put in this line commitments and contingencies, and they don't put a number in. So they're affirmatively saying to the unschooled reader, we've looked at these problems. This Ortel guy will rant and rave until he's dead. He'll probably have a provision in his will that if they haven't wound up the Clinton Foundation, you still have to go after the Clinton Foundation until it's wound up. But, we've looked at this.
Who does that obligation fall on?
Clinton found, this is just an absurd piece of work. And I hope that, we're very close now to the authorities jumping down everyone's throat on this. So with one more slide and we're done. It'll be very quick. Now this is an example of what nerds do. And I will happily call myself a numbers nerd. When you look at an audit, not only should you look at what's there, you should go back at previous audits and say, is there anything in this audit for 2018 that is missing from the first audit that Cohen-Resnick did? And in the first audit that Cohen-Resnick did, there's a footnote, a very important footnote. We've been through this in the past, where we explain the most important expense item in any audit, in any nonprofit organization, is its program service expenses. This is lifted from the Cohen-Resnick audit that was finished in 2017, in November, thereabouts, 2017, that had a special table in here. I've rejiggered the presentation of the table. But what I've put in here is anything that's in red are activities for which the Clinton Foundation had no authority to pursue as a tax-exempt organization. And it's not a question here of like, well, out of 200 million, 225 million, we screwed up with $10. Right. 94%, as it happens, 94% of the declared program service expenses, audited by Cohn-Resnick, were for unauthorized activities.
Is that good?
Not so much. Not so
You know, he said that in that evening with Hill and Hillary. Chelsea said something about you're operating at 5% something. And he's like, isn't that good? It's like, are you really that stupid?
So you look at this. This is a confession of fraud right here.
Right.
They
What
issue
else
this.
is new?
Right. Well, they issue this thing, and they tell you, that the overwhelming majority, 2/3 of our activities are with the Clinton Health Access Initiative. This thing is issued in November 2017. On March 7th, 2017, the Clinton Health Access Initiative left the family of the Clinton Foundation. For some strange reason, they said, we're not going to, you control us, you own us, but we don't want that. We're just going to walk away. They don't explain how that happened. None of these other things were validly authorized. The Clinton Presidential Center, I would debate whether all 12 million is validly attributable to the Clinton Presidential Center. Some of it is overstated depreciation, because I don't think the Clinton Foundation actually spent $165 million to put the thing together. Be that as it may, you don't need to make much bigger a case than we made from a technical standpoint. They have no authority to operate a general purpose endowment, yet they did so. They solicited a lot of money, starting, I would believe, in 2011 or thereabouts, from an unregistered base in New York and other unregistered bases from people who saw a political benefit to contributing money to the Clintons. So the general purpose endowment is a complete fraud. The building complex is another fraud. They've confessed to the fact that the overwhelming majority of their activities are not authorized. And yet, this Cohn-Resnick firm, with all the warnings we've given them,
Meh.
it's like, never mind.
Is that a problem?
Yeah. So we're at a point now where if we have a real FBI, which I think there are many good people at the FBI.
You say that all the time. I have seen no evidence of that.
Well, I'm just thinking on the balance of probabilities, there's 35,000 people in the FBI. There have to be 33.
The janitors are probably on the up and up.
No, I think what it is, it's the Harry Markopolos equivalents in the FBI. They look at this and they go up to their boss and they say, hey, this is a fraud.
Oh, you're
And the
fired.
boss says, you don't understand. The game of the FBI is to get dirt on dynastic political families and let them get away with some of it, but let them know at any point in time, we can use that dirt to ruin you, even though we're just, the head of the New York field office. That could be the game, or maybe it's the Peter Strokes or whatever. So, in summary, and I know I've taken longer than I might ordinarily take to cover something like this, Cohn-Resnick and the FBI crashing into Cohn-Resnick, which cannot stand behind any privilege. It's an accounting firm. So they can't assert that their notes, their working papers, their correspondence back and forth with various Clinton people, the records of who restricted the scope of their audit and when, were there any complaints about this? They can't say to the FBI, we're not giving that to you. And they also can't say to the FBI, well, our regular practice immediately after we do an audit is to burn every shred of evidence that can't be bleach bit. You can't do that either. So if the FBI wanted to quickly crack the back of the Clinton Foundation, they would raid Cohn-Resnick. And they would raid the homes of the partners involved and the people involved, and they would raid the offices. Mm-hmm. And they would also consider going to the Accounting Licensing Board for what I think it's New York State, and try to figure out for how long have trustees and donors known that this was a fraud, and why would, as we discussed in the previous broadcast, why would Bill Gates, ostensibly a smart dude, allow himself to give $190 million through his foundation to an epic fraud? Why would he do that?
Yeah.
And I think the answer to those questions are, as Donald Trump would say, not good.
Right. Now, Charles, we spoke briefly about this. I find this particularly interesting. I don't know if you've seen this, but it's a little sort of graphic illustration of the function of the rear door on the 727. And look at that. We got D.B. Cooper hopping out the back.
And Epstein said I could do that, or at least I can get people who are complaining about whatever I just did to them to do that.
Well, I mean, we joke about it, but the truth is the more I've researched this, the more I've come to realize that the Boeing 727 is an extremely unique and versatile strategic platform. It's really the only private jet that you could purchase inexpensively that allows you to drop a Halo team out the back. If you wanted to put commandos in somewhere, you could do it.
Yeah.
If you wanted to drop dead people, drugs, whatever.
Live people.
Well, they're not going to be alive for too long after you drop them out of a jet going 200 miles an hour, unless they have a parachute and know what they're doing. But that's basically the show for today, Charles. I did want to remind everyone, if you're watching this now on the Jason Goodman YouTube channel, you're going to be watching a playback. Live streaming has been disabled by a malicious social media attack. So the shows are going out live on Crowdsource the Truth 2. And if people aren't yet subscribers to the Crowdsource the Truth 2 YouTube channel, it's a good thing to do. That's the backup channel. And if anything happens to the main channel, as has happened just 2 weeks ago, you can get the live streams. This new feature, Charles, which is the super stickers, which I don't know exactly what that is, but it's kind of replaced augmented super chat. I just lost sound. Can you still hear me? Maybe my microphone just lost battery power because somehow I'm silent all of a sudden.
Well, I'll keep talking. Perhaps I couldn't to explain there is.
Oh no, sorry, it's back.
All right.
Weird. There's all kinds of weird technical things happening, Charles. I cannot explain them, but I have no first evidence that it's anything other than
Gremlins.
yeah, I don't know, it just happened again.
If
Anyway.
you could just go up. It comments a little bit there. Somebody's asked a question I would like to answer. Somebody
Sure.
just a bit further
I have
up.
no control right now for some reason. Something's happening here, Charles. Okay,
There we
there we
go.
go.
Somebody says, can a donor, Hank Bangor in Maine, or Hank in Bangor, Maine, can a donor to the Clinton Foundation sue the foundation for fraud and theft? Absolutely.
Ah, there you go. So people should. But anyway, if people want to test out that super sticker thing, I believe what happens is you put some money there, it gives you some sort of like an emoji type of graphic, and it sends money to Crowdsource the Truth, which is an interesting new feature. I'm not really too aware of how it works, but perhaps people want to test it out. I really do believe the best way from a viewer's standpoint and from my standpoint to sponsor the show is to go to subscribestar.com/crowdsourcethetruth or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth, and you can become a monthly sponsor for as little as $2. Most people choose $5. That seems to be the average. There's different benefits that people get. $5, you get access to the Discord chat. $10, you get the amazing Sunday with Charles screensaver. People who become sponsors at $25 and higher are going to be eligible for the new program, where after 3 months of $25 sponsorship, you get the exclusive Robert Mueller Nothing Burger mug, and you're going to be doing a lot to help keep Crowdsource the Truth sustainable. You get access to a huge exclusive library of video content that only sponsors can get, and even the lowest dollar sponsors at $2 per month get access to that library. Got Lee Stranahan coming up at 7 o'clock. He's going to talk to us about the real reasons behind this Ukraine gate shenanigans and the show that's going on in Congress. So I hope everybody will join me at 7 o'clock. Charles, we'll see you on Sunday. There's some time off that's going to happen sometime soon, right? You're going away somewhere or something?
Yeah, I'm going to be away. I haven't taken a vacation in a while. I'm going to be away. So next week on Wednesday and also Thanksgiving's next Thursday.
Yeah.
So from Tuesday of next week through the following Tuesday, I will be out of commission or out of contact.
Hopefully not out of commission. We
Well,
don't
out
want that.
of contact. So
But
at an
people-
undisclosed location that I'll
Undisclosed
reveal
location.
later.
So people can stay tuned in, and I will see everybody later tonight for High Dive with Lee Stranahan. Thanks for watching, everybody.